Good morning, everyone. Now, just recently, there's been a little bit of a falling out within some groups within the very, very small LGBTQIAAPPP2S plus whatever plus alphabet community. And this seems to be a bit of an argument, or actually, two different groups appearing, which are tearing strips out of each other at the moment. Now, that's not everybody, but there's some people who just want to say, we are not all of these this alphabet soup. We are just LGBs. And then on the other side, there's the TQQ and all the rest. So we have the LGBs versus the TQs. Now, that's not everybody who's an LGB and everybody who's a TQ, but some of them are actually at each other's throats at the moment. To me, this is glorious because you have different groups of cultural Marxists who have just turned against each other, because what cultural Marxism has done is created lots of new narratives with ever increasing groups of victims, as they say. These groups of victims are set up to accuse society of being institutionally racist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, Islamophobic, and all kinds of other things that you can think of. But the TQs have pushed ahead more than some of the LGBs would like. The thing is, both of these groups, whether you take them separately or whether you take them as a whole alphabet soup collective, have been instigating the Cultural Revolution, the Western Cultural Revolution, since the 1960s. And it has been a revolution which has inverted all of our values and principles, undermined traditional family values, undermined Christianity, undermined anything that is conservative, and is trying to corrode everything and create chaos. So the TQs, as if you like, were not really at all present in the 1960s. You had the first semblance of this revolution, I think, with feminists. Beforehand, there was first wave feminism, which was about equal opportunities for women. Nothing wrong with that at all. I completely support that. Then there's second wave feminism, which came sort of developing up to that, but sort of the 1960s as well, which was more about equal outcomes and women saying, we don't need men. Now, that's very dangerous. I don't believe in striving for equal outcomes for men and women at every level in every institution, because it simply doesn't work. And as Jordan Peterson well noted from his research, in the countries which has created the most opportunity for women, Scandinavian countries, the outcomes are the most different, because not many women choose to be engineers, and not many men choose to be nurses, for example. So trying to create equal outcomes is really just a waste of time, if anything. But then the other side of that is women saying, or feminists, not all women, but feminists, if you like, a certain group of women who were pushing cultural Marxism and pushing a grievance narrative. They don't represent all women. They're a small minority of women, but very powerful culturally, pushing the notion that women don't need men. So women can do what the old song from Eurythmics, sisters are doing it for themselves. Now, again, nothing wrong at all with women doing some of the things that were traditionally done by men. But when women as a collective, or feminists, if you like, say, we don't need men, then they try to tear down masculinity. And that was one of the first dreadful parts of the Cultural Revolution in the West. But that's hot on the heels of that. came the whole LGB movement, if you like, which back in the early days was called GLB, but I think they changed it to put the L first because of feminism. So, the women have to come first before the men. So quite early on, radical feminism tied up with GLB became LGB, which then became LGBT and then LGBTQ, etc., etc. So there are certain political goals which the LGB or LGBT, as it was, movement had. One, they wanted same-sex marriage, so to redefine marriage, and they also wanted same-sex adoption. Back in the early days, you had appalling groups like PI in the UK. You might know what PI stands for, or NAMBLA in the USA, in North America. You may know what that stands for. And that was pushing for recognition of what, to use a euphemism, we now know as MAPS, minor attracted persons. And you know what that means. So that's all integral to the LGBT movement from the 60s, especially worked up during the 70s and 80s, and then into the 2000s, 2010s, where they actually got their way. And in most of the Western world, got the definition of marriage changed so that it was not a man and a woman as it should be, but it can also be a man and a man, a woman and a woman. In some countries, in South America, they've gone even further, and now they recognize polyamorous marriages or something like that. So you can have 3-person marriages and 4-person marriages and so on. This is what the LGBs, if you like, were in the vanguard of this. They've been pushing the Cultural Revolution for decades, but now they've largely got their political ambitions. And so they're like, okay, well, we've got all that we've wanted. Not everything, because they're still pushing for a ban on what they call conversion therapy, which would undermine free speech and cancel free speech on things that the LGB part of the alphabet soup doesn't like. But then the next stage of the revolution is the TQs, which is even more disturbing and even more insane than what we had before. And this is really then tied into the 4th wave feminism, which is that men can be women. So the TQ part of the alphabet soup says that men can be women, women can be men. There's something that's called gender that's different to sex. Sex isn't important, and anyone can choose their gender, and anyone can change their gender, 5 different times in a week if they want to, and they should be recognised in law just by saying, you just wake up in the morning, go into work and say, I'm a woman today, and everyone has to recognise you as a woman. And if you don't, you will be accused of misgendering someone, which is transphobic, and then you can lose your job, and you might even be sent to prison for a hate crime. And this is where the alphabet soup people are going now. But some of the LGBs don't like that because they don't want to be associated with this, because the vast majority of people absolutely hate it and simply cannot stand how the rainbow nonsense. The rainbow is a Christian symbol, by the way, but it's been appropriated and destroyed by the alphabet people. So what it's come to represent now is all of this kind of insanity. And some of the LGBs are saying, well, we don't want to be associated with that anymore, even though they've been very happy to be associated with it for decades. But now that's become the vanguard of the Cultural Revolution and is just so insane and so perverse and so degenerate that people have just had their fill of it and just had enough of it, including some of the alphabet people. So you've now got some of the LGBs at loggerheads with some of the TQs. And there was a court case in the UK a couple of weeks ago where a TQ organisation took an LGB organisation to court to try to strip them of their charity status. My opinion is that none of these things should have charity status because they're all political lobbying groups, and political lobbying groups should not have charity status at all. I mean, charities, or NGOs as they sort of seem to be called now, should be doing charity work. You have age organisations concerned with helping older people. You have disability organisations concerned with helping disabled people. But you should not have alphabet people having charity NGOs with charitable status, where the most of what they do is political lobbying to try to change the law in order to change the definition of marriage, to change the definition of biological sex to gender, and then introduce gender fluidity into law, and also to ban conversion therapy. You see, the problem I have with some of this is now the LGBs are presenting themselves as conservative and traditional, which is absolutely not true. And that notion needs to be entirely and completely rejected. They have been at the vanguard of the revolution of cultural Marxism for decades. Now the revolution's moved on. Some of them feel uncomfortable. So now they're saying, oh, we're conservative. You're not conservative. And what has been, very disappointing to me in the world of political commentary is that many people who say they're conservative have actually said, well, what the TQs are doing is terrible for the LGBs. We support the LGBs, which means they support the political positions of the LGB groups. They're supporting gay marriage. They're supporting a ban on conversion therapy. These are not conservative positions. They are progressive liberal positions. So if you're a conservative, you wouldn't be supporting those political things. There's some people who are saying, yeah, I support the 6 striped flag, but we reject the progress flag with all the other nonsense in the corner. No, that's not a conservative position. That's not even a classic liberal position. The people who are saying that are in reality 1960s liberals, 1960s progressives. They love the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, but they don't like this stage of the Cultural Revolution, which has moved on and is clearly insane and it's clearly demonic. We can see that now, whereas it might not have been obvious in the 70s, 80s, 90s. So let's not pretend that this is conservative, because the LGB groups, while I completely agree with them that the political aims of the TQ part of the alphabet people are absolutely appalling and they should not even be entertained. Particularly the appalling sexualization, transsexualization of children in schools, where young children are being given material that is completely confusing and unscientific, that says you're not a boy. If you're a boy, you might not be a boy, you might be a girl, and therefore you can't decide whether you're a boy or a girl until you're older or whatever, or you can decide now if you want to be different to your anatomy. This is just absolute nonsense. But this is being taught to kids as scientific fact in school, and this is coming from the TQ side of the alphabet people. And I abhor that, and I would, if I had the chance, make a law to protect children from this kind of nonsense. But you see, the LGBs still want to go in. They still want relationships and sex education. They still want to teach children there are all different kinds of families. Some children have 2 mummies. Some children have 2 daddies. This, again, is nonsense. A child has a mother and a father. Families that have been fabricated, where you have a same-sex couple that has adopted someone who's not their own child, or has had a surrogate birth from another, using a rented womb, for example, are not normal families, natural families, in the sense that we've always understood family. And if you're conservative, you will go on understanding family in that sense, that the best and the normal way of having a family, which in every study shows the best outcomes for children in every area, is for a mother and a father to be married to each other and to have their own children. And that's the norm. Now, of course, sometimes things go wrong. I know sometimes one parent will, have a tragic accident or something, or sometimes there's, problems that might lead to divorce, something like that. But that happens, of course. Life isn't perfect. But we should not be deliberately creating and manufacturing and engineering different types of families which deliberately undermine the traditional family model. And that's what's happening. And that's what the LGBs have been pushing for decades. And that is not conservative. That is anti-conservative. It's anti-traditional. And we must recognize that and not support it. So if you are a conservative commentator, or pretending to be a conservative commentator, and in this argument that has sprung up between the LGBs and the TQs, if you are now going and supporting the political positions of the earlier part of the Cultural Revolution, where the LGBs were in the vanguard and undermining traditional values, then you are not conservative at all. And please don't pretend to be. You're a 1960s liberal. Say what you are, and get out of the way for real conservatives to restore all of our traditional values and restore our nation again, and protect our children from all of the political ambitions from all of the alphabet people, whichever letter they most identify with. There you go. I've said it now. Have a nice day.